بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, in today's class we are going to remember we are talking about the integrals of qiyas, the integrals of analogy. There are four integrals. We took the first one in the last lecture, which is the original legal issue. Since it's kind of brief, I might just read it in English quickly. But the bulk of today's lecture is the second and the third integrals. The second integral is the ruling of the original legal issue. So we have the original legal issue, which is drinking alcohol is haram, for example, drinking alcohol or drinking grape and date wine more specifically. And then number two is what is the ruling of that act? That ruling of that act is haram. Now, for that to be considered part of the qiyas operation, there are conditions for that ruling, and that's what we're going to talk about. A quite extensive amount of conditions about identifying the ruling behind that. So we're going to go through that list and we're going to learn the things that we can do and that we cannot do in that ruling for it to be considered qiyas. So sometimes we're not sure of the ruling, or the ruling, there's a difference of opinion of how we get to that ruling, in which case that will affect its applicability. I think that's a word. It will affect its applicability in using it in qiyas. And then the third integral is the branch legal issue. So it's the new issue that we're trying to base, or we're trying to give the same ruling to that as we have on the first legal issue and its ruling that we have identified. So in the branch legal issue, we're going to look at 6 of the conditions, and we are going to again look at how opposing schools that have opposing opinions about the illah are going to deal with those type of differences and whether those type of differences impact or not. One thing to keep in mind in the entire discussion, we're always going to assume that there's like school A and school B, and school A and school B are opposing each other in identifying the illah or identifying a certain aspect of the ruling. So we're going to just follow that theme from the next few lectures to make sense of the text. Okay, we'll begin the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. We begin the way we normally begin, which is to say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. Well, actually, before I do the second integral, let me just read you the English text of the first integral so we remember. So he says, analogy has 4 integrals. The first integral is the original legal issue. The dominant opinion is that it is the object of the ruling that is similar, and in the dominant opinion, it is not a condition that there be a proof text to the permissibility of analogy in its type, nor an agreement on the ratio legis in it. So there can be differences of opinion of what the illah is. I mean, that's the whole point of the plurality of Islamic law. But that's the original legal issue, and it deals with the object. It deals with where the mahallul hukm is, where the act is going to take place. And that's important because when we just talk about the halal and the haram of the sharia, we're not always necessarily thinking of the object of the ruling. We're just thinking of the ruling in general. Like the object of the ruling of wudu are the body parts. That object is where the analogy takes place. Is there something else out there that has, like what happens if you have an artificial limb or something like that? So the object becomes the focus of the usuli when it comes to that. And then he says, rahimahullah, الثاني حكم الأصلي. The second is the ruling of the original legal issue. وشرطه ثبوته بغير قياس. And its condition is the ruling's establishment without analogy, ولو إجماعا, nor consensus, وكونه غير متعبد به بالقطع في قول, as well as it not being a legal issue used for worship based on certainty. So let's go back and look at that. So the second integral of the qiyas is that we have the second integral is the ruling of the original legal issue. So he says that it the ruling of this original issue cannot be a ruling that was established by qiyas, because the qiyas is secondary. What we want is the ruling of the first legal issue. So if I am going to posit that this is the first legal issue, and then someone asks me what's the hukm, and I say, well, I got to this hukm by way of qiyas, be like, well, that can't be the original legal issue, because qiyas is by definition a secondary legal legal argument. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So it can't be established by qiyas nor consensus. The one about consensus, there's a difference of opinion. What Shaykh al-Islam is, advocating is consensus. But when you get into the Hawashi literature, there'll be a difference of opinion about that, as well as it not being a legal issue based on worship, based on certainty, based on a qat'i dalil, because a qat'i dalil, absolute dalil, leads to certainty, and qiyas in the dominant opinion does not lead to certainty. It's a little bit lesser of a strength. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَكَوْنَهُ مِنْ جِنْسِ حُكْمِ الْفَرْعِ. The ruling of the original legal issue must be from the same type as the branch legal issue. Meaning, either we have shar'i, rational, or linguistic. So if we're doing an issue of analogy of language, well, the original rule, the original legal issue and its ruling have to be linguistic in nature, because then we're going to use that to base it and make qiyas on a branch legal issue. If it's an issue of sharia, of ahkam, it has to be something related to the ahkam. So it's got to be of the same genus, let's say, the same type. That's very important, because sometimes, it sounds like it's a no-brainer, but when you get into the weeds of Islamic law, sometimes you can make up that mistake. Like, oh, wait a second, is this a linguistic issue? Is it a rational issue? Is it a sharia issue? You have to stop and ask those questions to make sure that you're doing the right thing, because the worst thing that you can do is make false assumptions in the beginning of analogy, in the beginning of qiyas, only to find out way down the line you're way off target. And then you have to go back and look at all of the steps. It's like a mathematical, like long division equation. When you used to do long division on paper, you have the question up here, and then you keep going down and down and down and down and down, and then you keep writing your answer. And then this is how we did it when we were in school. You'd get the answer wrong, or like the remainder would be wrong. The teacher would be like, "We have to go back and trace your steps." So that could be very painful, to go back and review something. So these conditions, the reason he lays it out this way is that we can avoid that by asking ourselves the right questions in the beginning to lead to the right answers. So the ruling, just to repeat, the ruling of the original legal issue must be from the same type as the branch legal issue, that is, for example, shar'i, rational, or linguistic. وَأَلَّا يَعْدِلَ عَنْ سُنَنِ الْقِيَاسِ. And it must not go against the established pattern of analogy. And I bring up from the commentary, like the hadith regarding the testimony of Khuzaymah ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. Khuzaymah ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu was a companion that was, the Prophet ﷺ was coming back from a journey, and on the way back to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ had transacted and bought livestock from a Bedouin. And because, the people that have the livestock, they're going to move slower. The Prophet ﷺ was just him and maybe a couple of other people. Or I think actually in this case he was by himself. He was by himself, ﷺ. So he was quick, so he arrived in Medina. And then sometime later the Bedouin came. So the Prophet ﷺ went to claim his livestock. Witnessing all of this was Khuzaymah ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. So the Prophet ﷺ went to go buy, claim what he bought. And then the man's like, well, I already sold it. Or meaning that he sold it twice. Well, you can't do that. The Prophet ﷺ said, well, I bought it from you, on such and such place with such and such amount of money. So Khuzaymah came to the defense of the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, I bear witness that the Prophet ﷺ is, supporting he gave testimony to support the Prophet's claim ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ turned to him and said, Khuzaymah, you weren't even there. What do you know about this? And he said, Ya Rasulullah, I believe that you bring revelation from the heavens. You think I'm going to not believe you about some livestock? So the Prophet ﷺ was so happy. So he said, Khuzaymah, he said that Khuzaymah's testimony is worth the testimony of two people. That's the story. This story is important also for another reason, because when they came to document and catalog the written Quran during the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they had made as a condition that each verse not only is it memorized by the companions that it comes before the verse before it, that it comes after the verse before it and before the verse after it. They wanted actual written documentation that this is the order of the verse, and it came to two ayat in which everyone had memorized, but they couldn't find the written documentation except with Khuzaymah. But they wanted the written documentation to be from two people. So because it came from Khuzaymah, the Sahaba remembered the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, and they accepted that because his witnessing was worth two. Okay, that's a very elaborate tangent. The point is you can't use that for qiyas because this breaks the sunan of qiyas. This breaks the, how did I translate it? It goes against the established pattern of analogy because everyone's testimony is worth one, except he's a unique case. So in that case, or if there are other things out there like that, in our text, we won't be able to use that as qiyas. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَلَا يَكُونَ دَلِيلُهُ شَامِلًا لِحُكْمِ الْفَرْعِ, and that its evidence, here is the evidence of the ruling of the original legal issue, that its evidence not totally encompass the ruling of the branch legal issue. Well, obviously it can't encompass, because if it encompasses it, then it's not qiyas. It's just the ruling. So the issue with qiyas, the problem that qiyas is trying to solve, is we have something, it kind of looks like something we have in the Sharia, but has not itself been directly addressed. That's when you use qiyas. If it's been addressed and it just falls under the original legal issue, then it's not qiyas. That's what he's saying. Let me just try to finish the sentence before we run out of time on this clip. وَكَوْنُهُ مُتَّفِقًا عَلَيْهِ جَزْمًا بَيْنَ الْخَصْمَيْنِ فَقَطْ فِي الْأَصَحِ, and that the ruling of the original legal issue, what we're talking about here, is agreed upon amongst the opposing schools in the dominant opinion. So if, I'm going to make a crazy example, if we say that the drinking of alcohol, we say it's haram, but somebody else says it's not haram, well then we have a problem. How can we make qiyas based on something aslan when there's a difference of opinion? So I mean, obviously this is a point of consensus, of ijma', and it's actually not even just ijma', it's ma'lumun min ad-din bid-darura, it's necessarily known from religion. I'm just giving a crazy, wacky example so you can understand what he's saying. One more, I don't have time for the next sentence, so in the next clip, I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit. And again, sometimes I apologize, sometimes I can make everything fit in the 10 minutes and sometimes I can't, so we'll pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, let me just backtrack. He says, rahimahullah, and that its evidence, the evidence of the original legal issue, not totally encompass the ruling of the branch legal issue, because in which case then it's not going to be qiyas, as I said, and that the ruling of the original legal issue be agreed upon by opposing schools in the dominant opinion. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَالْأَصَحُ أَنَّهُ يُشْتَرَطُ اخْتِلَافُ الْأُمَّةِ عفوا والأصح أنه لا يشترط اختلاف الأمة. And the dominant opinion is that the difference of the ummah, or the nation, is not a condition. So there can be a difference of opinion. Okay, which is part of this issue of having agreement on. So it's one thought. The way I phrased it, maybe it sounded like it's two thoughts. So let me just read it in English. And one of the conditions here of the ruling of the original legal issue is that the ruling of the original legal issue is agreed upon by the opposing schools in the dominant opinion, and that the difference of the nation is not a condition, meaning that there is no stipulation in the dominant opinion that the opinion of school A and school B. Remember I said in the introductory clip, we're going to posit that there's school A and school B. You can think of them as Shafi'is and Hanafis, but I mean any two mujtahids. A condition is not that they disagree on the original legal issue. We're saying that the dominant opinion is that they agree on the hukm of the original legal issue. Otherwise, we won't be able to make qiyas because it's just all going to be disjointed from the beginning to the end. Okay, and then he says, رحمه الله, فإن اتفق عليه مع منع الخصم أن علته كذا فمركب الأصل أو وجودها في الأصل فمركب الوصف ولا يقبلان في الأصح. Here he's going to talk about something called القياس المركب, or a built or combined type of analogy, which in the dominant opinion is not accepted because there is some weakness in it. So there are two examples, and I'll read them for you, and then we'll give you examples from the actual Islamic law. If both schools agree on the ruling, but for different ratio legis, it is called murakkab al-asl. The original issue is combined. If both schools agree on the ruling, but one denies the existence of the ratio legis, it is called murakkab al-wasf, or it is combined by description, and these two types are not accepted in the dominant opinion. Okay, so let me give you an example of the murakkab al-asl, in which we agree with the hukum, both school A and school B agree, but for different reasons. Here, and these two examples are Shafi'is and Hanafis. When we say Shafi'is, by the way, in Usul al Fiqh, we really mean the mutakallimun, and then when we say the Hanafis, we mean the fuqaha. Remember, those two terms are the two camps of schools in Usul al Fiqh. The mutakallimun are the Shafi'is, the Malikis, and the Hanbalis, yani 95% of the time, and the fuqaha is a term that's used for the Hanafis. Sometimes, for short form, we just say عندنا with us, meaning the Shafi'is and then the Hanafis. But this is not a anyway, this is an usuli discussion, and I think we talked about that way back in the beginning. We have an issue about, there's a young boy, a young person who has gold jewelry, or a young girl who has gold jewelry. Is there zakah on the jewelry? Both are going to say no, but for different reasons, meaning the illah is different. For the Shafi'is, we do not have, and this is in the Shafi'i school now, we do not have the zakah on lawful gold jewelry. In the Hanafis, they say there is no zakah on the wealth of a young person. Two different reasons, two different illah, arriving at the same hukum. That's an example of murakkab al-asl, that the original issue is there's a combined or difference there. Then murakkab al-wasf, in which one denies the illah altogether. The example that he gives, which is kind of like a crazy example, but he says, like a man says, "Inna kahtu fulana fahiya taliq." If I divorce such and such woman, then she is. If I marry such and such woman, she is divorced. Well, you haven't married her yet for you to divorce her. So both sides negate negate that there's any divorce there, but the Hanafis disagree that there's an illah to start out. There's an illah in the first place, while the Shafi'is say there is an illah that makes that prohibited. So he says, in this kind, the dominant opinion, we do not do qiyas on things that are built that way. Okay, and then he says, وَلَوْ سَلَّمَ الْعِلَّةَ فَأَثْبَتَ Let me just read this paragraph in Arabic. This is from here until the end of the description of number 2, which is the ruling of the original legal issue, because it's kind of complicated. And let me just read it all one shot, and then we'll just do the English piecemeal. وَلَوْ سَلَّمَ الْعِلْمَةَ فَأَثْبَتَ الْمُسْتَدِلُّ وُجُودَهَا أو سلمه الخصم انتهض الدليل وإن لم يتفق عليه وعلى علته ورام المستدل إثباته ثم العلة فالأصح قبوله والأصح لا يشترط الاتفاق على أن الحكم الأصلي معلل أو نص على العلة. If the opposing school, so here we're thinking about school A and school B, just generic school A and school B, or mujtahid A and mujtahid B. I translated it as school because, we're like schools, schools of thought. If the opposing school agrees to the ratio legis and the other school proves this ratio legis exists, proves that this ratio legis exists in a particular ruling, or the opposing school agrees to this ratio legis exists in a particular ruling, then the evidence generated applies to the opponent's school. If both do not agree on the original legal issue, nor on the ratio legis, and one school established through evidence, then the dominant opinion is to accept this by the opponent's school. Basically, what he's saying is that when school A and school B are in a disagreement, but one school proves the ratio legis, or both schools agree to a type of ratio legis from one aspect, but then another school is silent on the ratio legis on another aspect, the school that has approved and adduced proof, then that also applies to the other school. So let me read that again. If the opposing school agrees to the ratio legis, and the other school proves that this ratio legis exists in a particular ruling, or the opposing school agrees that this ratio legis exists in a particular ruling, then the evidence generated applies to the opponent's school, because both schools are agreeing to the illah, but not necessarily one school is silent in how it applies to a certain particular hukum. So because one school has gone through the effort of proving the illah, then that proof also is incumbent on the other school. If both do not agree on the original legal issue, nor on the ratio legis, and one school established through evidence and the dominant opinion is that it is accepted by the opponent's school. And then he says, lastly, the dominant opinion is that consensus is not required in analogy to establish the ruling of the original legal issue or a direct text indicating the ratio legis. And the reason is, the whole point is we're looking for the illah. Remember I said in the previous classes that the whole point of qiyas is we're like detectives trying to find the illah. And in this case, there doesn't necessarily have to be a consensus when it's regards to this matter, because the whole point of the ijtihad is that we are looking for the ratio legis. Okay, this concludes the description of number 2. Here we've been looking at the second integral of analogy, which is the ruling for the original legal issue. And then next we're going to take in the next clip in its entirety, we're going to take number 3, which is the branch legal issue. This was the hukum of the original legal issue. Now we're going to look at the branch legal issue, the other legal issue that we have, that we're trying to use analogy to bring the hukum from the original legal issue to this branch legal issue. It's a little complicated. I'll do my best, inshallah, to complete it all in the next clip. So we'll see you back here for that discussion, inshallah. Okay, so now inshallah we're going to do integral number 3, which is the branch legal issue al-fara'. He says rahimahullah, الثالث الفرع وهو المحل المشبه في الأصح. Number 3 is the branch legal issue, the fara', and that's the one that we think is, or we believe is, and we hold to be similar to the first one, to the original one. والمختار قبول المعارضة فيه بمقتضى نقيض الحكم أو ضده ودفعها بالترجيح وإنه لا يجب الإيماء إليه في الدليل. In the dominant opinion, it is the one similar to the original legal issue. The chosen opinion is that there can be opposition to it by finding a different ratio legis leading to an opposite ruling or a reverse meaning. And reconciliation, tarjih, and preference can be made, and the chosen opinion is that you do not need to reference reconciliation when looking at the proof text. Okay, so now we have this branch legal issue that we want to cast a judgment on. What is the ruling of this branch legal issue? The original legal issue, we have the information. We have the hukum, we have the illah, it's been discussed, it's been cataloged, all of that kind of stuff. Now there is something new or there's something else. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be new. We usually assume that it's new, but it's just something else. Let's just say something else. There's no specific text in the Sharia about this issue. So now this is the branch we want to get to this branch. Of course, the fourth rukn, the fourth integral is the illah itself. That's like the meat, that's like the heart of qiyas. So we're going to get that in tomorrow's lecture. So today we're just talking about, in this last portion here, about the branch legal issue. There can be opposition to it. I mean, because there's a difference of opinion. That's why we have to do analogy. That's why we have to do qiyas. There can be a difference of opinion between school A and school B, for example, to follow my examples about the ratio legis. And people can argue whether the ratio legis is like leading to the opposite thing. There can be differences in that regards. And there's a couple of examples I wanted to give you. So for example, if you said wiping is an integral to wudu, al-masah. So therefore it is a sunnah to wipe your face 3 times. The opposing school will say wiping is part of wudu and it is not a sunnah to wipe your face 3 times. So they brought the same issue but argued the opposite from it. Or you can say, for example, or not the opposite, but is opposing it. An opposite understanding is, for example, if you say the Prophet ﷺ وَاظَبَ عَلَى الْوِتْرِ, he constantly prayed Salatul Witr, and therefore the tashahhud is obligatory in the witr prayer. Then the opposite school says that the witr prayer is a timed prayer because it's prayed at a certain time of the day, at the end of the day, like the other time prayers. So therefore it's a sunnah to do the tashahhud like in Fajr prayer. So this is the opposite, an opposite. So these type of things can happen and will happen and do happen in the branch legal issue. So let me just repeat that. The chosen opinion is that there can be opposition to it, meaning find the branch legal issue, by finding a different ratio legis leading to either an opposite ruling or a reverse meaning. And in that case, you have to do tarjih, you have to reconcile. So reconciliation and preference can be made, and in the chosen opinion, you don't have to reference that you're doing that when you're looking at the proof text. Okay, now the conditions of the branch legal issue. He's going to give us 6 of these conditions. وشرطه وجود تمام العلة فيه. Number 1 is the existence of the complete ratio legis from the original legal issue. فإن كانت قطعية فقطعية أو ظنية فظنية. فإن كانت قطعية فقطعية عفوا فإن كانت قطعية فقطعية أو ظنية فظنية أو دون أو عفوا وأدون كتفاح ببر بجامع الطعم. So he says the existence of the first condition is the existence of the complete ratio legis from the original legal issue. That illah has to exist. As we will come to see, the illah has to exist in both. If the ratio legis is absolute, then the analogy is absolute. If the ratio legis is partial, then the analogy will be partial. If the ratio legis is less than, like in the example of the analogy between apple and grain, or it could be less than partial. And so if the ratio legis is absolute, the qiyas is going to be absolute. If the ratio legis is partial or less than even partial, then the qiyas will be less than partial. The example that he gives is the analogy between apple and grain in the section of usury, of riba. The illah is that there are a ta'am, is foodstuffs. So the illah exists in apples and exists in grain. It completely surrounds it all. So the illah can be used for that type of analogy. Okay, number 2, وَأَلَّا يُعَارِضَ. It can't negate the ruling. So, the branch legal issue can't negate the ruling of the first one, because that's what we're going to base the qiyas on. Number 3, وَلَا يَقُومُ الْقَاطِعُ عَلَى خِلَافِهِ. The absolute text does not lead to its opposite. Number 4, وَكَذَا خَبْرُ الْوَاحِدِ فِي الْأَصَحِّ لِتَجْرِبَةِ النَّظَرِ. Number 4 is in the dominant opinion, the unitary narration, the ahad narration, does not oppose it except by the experience of the one trained doing analogy. Number 5, وَيَتَّحِدُ حُكْمُهُ بِحُكْمِ الْأَصْلِ. Its ruling matches the ruling of the original legal issue. And number 6, وَلَا يَتَقَدَّمْ على حكم الأصل حيث لا دليل له. The ruling of the branch legal issue does not come before the original legal issue as there is no proof for it. Let me just finish it and then we'll go back for the commentary. لا ثبوته بالنص جملة ولا انتفاء نص أو إجماع يوافق على المختار. It is not a condition to establish its ruling through a text, nor is it a condition that no text exists, nor consensus on a similar legal matter in the dominant opinion. So he gave us 6 conditions for the branch legal issue. The branch legal issue has to have the same illah as the original legal issue. The strength of that illah will also equal the strength of the qiyas. We'll talk about the illah specifically in the next class. The branch legal issue can't negate the ruling of the original legal issue, because if it does, then it's opposite. We can't do qiyas. And there can't be an absolute text that goes against the branch legal issue and our understanding of it, in which case the whole thing crumbles. We also can't have a ahad tradition that goes against the branch legal issue. Only an expert will be able to navigate between that. That's what he was trying to say. The ruling of the branch legal issue has to match the ruling of the original legal issue. That's why there's qiyas, because it has the same illah, so therefore this ruling is the same as this ruling. And obviously the branch legal issue can't come before the previous legal issue, because we're trying to establish the ruling of the branch issue. So in the order of things, it's the asl first, and then comes the secondary one. So this is a summary of the conditions of the branch legal issue. So we've taken the original legal issue, the ruling of the original legal issue, the branch legal issue, and what's next is the heart of this entire conversation, in which all of this inshallah will become very clear, is the illah, the ratio legis itself. How do we understand it? How do we identify it? We'll talk about that in the next class. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Okay, alhamdulillah, in today's class we took a massive chunk of this topic, and feeling very blessed that we actually were able to do that. I was worried in the beginning, but alhamdulillah. We took integral number 2 and integral number 3 of the 4 integrals of analogy. We did a little bit of the first one, which is the original legal issue. I just read you the English translation. And then we spent most of the time on the ruling, the second integral, which is the ruling of the original legal issue. And we talked about some of the conditions for that and how we deal with identifying the ruling of the legal issue such that we can make qiyas on it. So there are conditions to that. We also looked at issues in which two like theoretical schools are debating an issue. They might come to the same conclusion, but they have different reasons, meaning different illah, that we call that murakkab al-asl, or they can have the same ruling, but one school affirms that there's a ratio legis and the other school doesn't acknowledge there's a ratio legis at all, which is called murakkab al-wasf, and we said in those cases we can't do analogy. Then we talked about, as a kind of a branch of that discussion, if there are two schools that are arguing and one school has done a good job in articulating the illah and the other school agrees that there is an illah, the fact that they haven't done the articulation but this school has articulated and proved it, that proof then is incumbent on that school. And then sometimes that happens in which we are able to reconcile some of those differences. And then number 3, the third analogy, is the branch legal issue. And we looked at 6 of the key descriptions of it. that it has to be the same as the original one. It can't be the opposite. It has to come second, not first. There can't be a text, either whether it's a qat'i text or a unitary ahad tradition, can't go against it. And that it has to match the first legal issue, because that's how we are building our qiyas. And yeah, those are the main topics that we talked about in this lecture. And then inshallah in tomorrow's lecture, in the next lecture, however you depend to view the classes, we're going to talk about the illah and moving forward. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.